Bruce Cardenas is the man. He helped Quest Nutrition with their billion-dollar exit. He's been in the Marines. He's been a bodyguard for some of the most famous people that you can think of. Think of Arnold. You can think of Courtney Love, Sammy Davis Jr., and many more, as well as being involved in a few shootouts where he saved people's lives. And that's what we really strip back in this episode. We dive into his experience in the Marines and the LAPD, his experience in being in these shootouts, nearly having his life taken by a gang member, how thankfully he was saved by a watchful partner, as well as how to protect yourself and how to make sure that you are carving the best path possible as a man. That comes down to communication, it comes down to relationships, and it comes down to self-confidence. I know that you're going to love this episode. Bruce is an absolute living legend, and he unpacks a lot of value for you to take away and implement in your own life. Bruce, welcome. Thanks for jumping on. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Love it, man. So we were talking a little bit beforehand about initiation into manhood and the Boy Scouts and the Marines. I'd love to maybe just start there and talk about some moments that you've had in your life where you've transitioned or had some pretty significant changes in your life where you had to become somebody else and an old version of you had to die.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess I could start, I grew up a kind of a middle-class kid in New Jersey, small town, one of five kids. I was a middle kid. And, one thing that was pretty fortunate for me, my father was very involved. While he grew up middle class, would have been called a workaholic then, or now an entrepreneur, then a workaholic. But he was still very involved with us with, Boy Scout. He was our Boy Scout leader and assistant little league coach and football coach. So he stayed very engaged with what we did. So that was a really good thing for me as far as having a mentor and someone to look up to. But one of the one big things that was like from growing a manhood thing, I guess, at some point during the Boy Scouts, there was an ordeal you go through called Order of the Arrow. And it was a father-son thing. We went away for a weekend. And I remember the first 24, it might have been 24 hours. There was no talking. We were just going into the woods and making fire and cooking. And we did all that, together. So it was a very bonding weekend, which that kind of all went away. I haven't seen that in years and years, those kind of things, those kind of experiences. I know that some of my friends now have organizations now that are bringing that back in the States, Bedros Keuilian, and different organizations now. But there was a period of time where I think it just kind of fizzled out for years, I think, right? I think sons and teenagers, grew apart from their fathers or their parents. And I think even with modern day electronics, right, and friendships. So that was a tough thing, but that was a great experience for me. I never forget that. It really brought my father and I tighter. And that doesn't mean as I became a more of an annoying teenager, we didn't grow apart a little bit, but that was definitely a big turning moment in my life for sure.
Yeah, amazing. And then what was the next one, the Marines? Like what was the
Yeah, for sure. So I was at a point. I wanted to be a police officer my entire life. I had an uncle that was a police officer. My neighbor was a state trooper. I knew that's what I wanted to do. That was my calling. I've always been, a servant leader, if you will. And I graduated high school, and I really didn't even think about college. I was just a daydreamer through school, kind of a C student, not realizing that, wow, I wanted to be a cop, but I had no path to get there. So I got out of high school, and I used to do ride-alongs with our local police department, small department, 6-person department. And I went to the chief one day and said, I really want to join the department. What do I need to do? And he said, listen, you're very young, immature, if you will, in a very kind way. But if you go in the Marine Corps, I'll hire you the day you get out. He didn't say any other branch. He said specifically the Marine Corps. So I grabbed my buddy and said, hey, we're not really doing a whole lot in this town. Let's go in the Marine Corps. And I discovered there's a big world out there, that there was way more than New Jersey. And that was, once again, a big life-changing, going through boot camp. From the time I left my house to when my parents came down to my graduation in Paris Island, they clearly saw the difference. I mean, you grow up, you go in a boy and you're out a man with responsibilities and knowing what it is to have many more challenges ahead of you in life, but definitely a learning experience and growing up very quickly.
Specifically, do you think were there moments in there that there were some significant challenges for you to overcome personally? Like was it the physical stuff, or was it the structure, or what was it?
I think all of it, like structure. I mean, you go in, every minute of your life is accounted for, every single minute. So structure, accountability, discipline, getting up at the same time. All of it combined, the physical fitness challenges. I mean, when you go from, getting out of high school, getting up when you want, working part time, I think, I recommend that to a lot of people. Anyone that doesn't anyone that doesn't have a real clear path in life, I think the military is definitely an option. You could it pays for your school if you want to go to college afterwards or even before, and create the discipline and the challenges and all the structure. I think all the structure you need, I think it created the foundation for the rest of my life.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think if I hadn't, 'cause we don't have as much of a, I guess, patriotism in Australia, and that connection to the forces. And I would thankfully ended up on a fishing boat, like a diving boat for crayfish, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
very structured. And I was out on the middle of the ocean for like 3 weeks at a time. And it's like if I hadn't had no escape, like before that, I was dealing drugs, getting into fights, I was doing all sorts of stupid stuff, and it was like that removal and then enforced structure that I think almost feels like you have to channel all of this energy you have as a young man, 18, 19, 20.
It definitely, and I created organizational skills for me. I mean, discipline. I never made my bed before till I went in the Marine Corps. But everything around, even diet and exercise. Eating a balanced diet. Um, there's so many pluses to it. I mean, the downside, yeah, there's a little bit of mental gymnastics, I call it. Um, but there's a lot of structure, and like I said, it helped me once I got out and started my own company and did other things in life. It was definitely a pivotal moment for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And did you go with your buddy? Like you basically grabbed him and you're like, dude, we're doing this. And then both of
Yeah,
you
yeah,
went?
he was all for it. We went through the
Epic.
program. We were in the same. We ended up being the same platoon, and we lost. I mean, we went out, and once we went into the main Marine Corps, he went his way and I went mine. We stayed in
Hmm.
touch afterwards, but it was definitely it was good to have someone in there with me that I knew.
Yeah, 100%. That's epic. And then
It's a
so
very
what happened?
scary.
Yeah, yeah, it's frightening. Yeah, I
I mean, I don't
remember
care what
like,
anyone says. I remember I knew nothing about it, and I remember there was a guy on our first time I actually been on a flight on an airplane on a jet was from the time when I left Newark, New Jersey to go down to Carolinas, and there was a guy on our flight, and I'll never forget this. He's like, "Yeah, don't. My dad's in the Marine Corps. It's going to be no problem." He was talking a lot of confidence, and we're just like quiet and listening, and he was literally one of the guys who ended up washing out of our platoon. Like I remember clear as day, he was up on the deck in the fetal position after doing push-ups, and he went home. But
oh my
it's a lot
God.
of it's not the physical. When you're a young guy, I mean, everyone can handle the physical. I mean, they push it to the limits, but it's really the mental gymnastics, I call it, of just the up and down and breaking down your weapon and running through. I mean, just things. I mean, a little bit of it's obviously it was a little bit of punishment, but it also created that structure and discipline for when we went to combat and stuff. That there was real like, wow, we're ready now.
What did you find most difficult? I guess, yeah, when you were going, was it the mental stuff or was it just the repetition? Like, what did you find most difficult? And then what did you tell yourself to overcome those
I
challenges?
think the hardest part, I mean, is mental, and you just have to keep telling yourself that there's an end to this. That it's not going to go on forever. When we go on these forced marches, and we knew we were going 25 miles, and you just had, okay, I got 19 more miles, just like doing a marathon. Friends of mine done marathons. They just have those mile markers. It eventually is going to end, and that's all I thought about was the end game. Okay, I just got to get 5 more hours or whatever. Same thing when you get sleep deprived. You just think, okay, there's going to be an end to this. I always look at the end game because I feel like, okay, I'm going to get to sleep for 6 hours or something when this is over. So that's my way to get pushed to it. Some people have different ways. I also look at it this way: if you're in a group, I've always been involved with these structures with groups, Boy Scouts, Marines, LAPD. I figure as long as I'm never going to tap out. So I mean, there's a group of 50 people, right? I'm gonna make it along with that group. I won't be I may not be the first to finish, but I'm not going to be the last.
Mm.
I always look at it that way.
And do you feel like you've noticed that's missing nowadays? This group, us doing things together, because like I mean, I'm in the middle of South America, very far from Australia, very far from our friends in North America, and it's so easy to be more isolated these days. Do you feel like that's missing today in young men?
Yeah, it's definitely, and I mean, COVID didn't help it because I think people definitely got used to being alone. and isolated. And while I think there's like the Squire program that my friend Pedro Schooley has, and there's
Mm.
different programs that father and sons can do, and there's even programs that men can do as groups. And I think it's coming back, but it's definitely missing because a lot of guys I know that have kids that are in their teens or even 20s are they're solo, they do things alone. And I don't think that's really good for mental health either.
Mm.
We're as a we're tribal. We belong to groups
Totally.
dating back to the beginning of time, and I think it's important to spend time with people
Yeah, 100%.
to grow and nurture.
Yeah. And when you got back, did you go to that deputy and did you get that job, or did
What's
you go
that?
somewhere else? Did you when you got back from the Marines, did you go to that
Oh,
office and get that job?
so the irony was, once I left New Jersey and got in the Marine Corps, I realized there was a big world out there, and it was great because I experienced so many great things, traveled the world, and what happened was I ended up long away from New Jersey. I was in California. I competed in a powerlifting meet in the Marine Corps, but it was in Camp Pendleton. So I went to Camp Pendleton for a powerlifting meet. And while I was there was a career day on base. And they had these different companies from around the country, trucking companies and IBM and technical companies. And I saw some law enforcement agencies were advertising that they were hiring. And I was like, wow, they're beautiful weather here, beautiful people, and you get paid too. So I literally stayed and I processed with a bunch of police departments and got picked up by LAPD. So I was
Wow.
pretty fortunate. Probably one of the
Wow.
biggest and best police departments in the country.
Amazing. And how long did you stay there for before you got into the
So I
administration?
stayed there full time 12 years. I left. I'm still a reserve in law enforcement. I've been a reserve for years. I left because I pursued I ended up starting a security business, which started out small, just working part time with a retired sergeant, and it ended up becoming a pretty big business, and I just couldn't manage both. So after
Mm.
12 years, I left that full time to pursue the security business and the bodyguard business, which is
What
still which I still have.
what was the main difference you felt between the Marines and then being in the police force?
I think that once again, discipline, rules, regulation, accountability. I think it was going from, I think, serving the country obviously on a broader scale in the Marine Corps to serving the community, and a lot more public relations involved with police work. I learned a lot of things. I can share this. I went through the police academy in LAPD Police Academy, and while you learn a lot of rules, regulations, and structure, you don't really know what till you get out of the academy and get in the field what the real world's like. Because a lot of people, it's they teach you rules and regulations, and I quickly found out the world's not black and white; it's very
Mm.
gray. And while a lot of people, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and I really liked working within the spirit of the law,
Mm.
and everything I did was very gray because I think a lot of people, we hire from the human race for all these things, the police departments, Marine Corps, and not everyone is cut out for it. And I quickly found out that while I was out there, and my first training officer was a very rough, gruff guy, I had to take what I could learn from him, the best and the worst, right? So
Mm.
I really learned that it was while you encounter a lot of bad people, you encounter a lot of good people too.
Right.
And I was quickly, that being a good person and being good public relation and good steward of the community was just as important. So I learned to talk to people, learned a lot of skills. One of the skills I learned was listening. He did teach me this the first time we got in the police car. There was there's a notepad between both of you, like a little clipboard on this setup where your equipment is, and he drew this picture of a face, and it was a big round face, and it had two big eyes and two big ears, and there was no mouth. And he said, that's you, Bruce. He goes, I need you to do a lot of looking and listening, but not a lot of talking.
Amazing.
And that really actually carried me actually through my life. I still talk about this now when I talk to people. Very few people practice listening skills. If you'll notice, even in a conversation, people will usually formulate a response before you're even finished with your sentence. So, and I have that struggle with some of my friends. And I have to always correct them because I sometimes I can't even finish a story. So it's important, even in life, in business, and in everything you do. Listen to what people want. Listen to actually what the customer's saying. Listen to actually what your spouse or your partner's actually saying instead of responding, thinking you already know what to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I feel like I've had that same experience because I love my friends, and a lot of my friends are like entrepreneurial and driven, and they often have that energy where they just want to talk, 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 and you just think, "Fuck, man!" Like, just
Yeah, yeah,
listen for once in your life. But that's a part of the personality that you love about them
it,
at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
It's so funny. And what do you think about? Maybe you could expand a little bit more on that listing. What would be some key points for someone? Maybe it's just setting a good time and space to have important conversations, but I imagine you guys didn't have, you couldn't take someone from the street and get them over to a nice quiet area and have an important conversation with them and change the setting. Like, how did you go about building relationships quickly?
Well, sometimes the relationships are just are quick moments in time. I mean, obviously, you have maybe an encounter with a bad situation, domestic violence, a fight, gang members. I think I was good at de-escalating things, separating people, and finding a common ground. I know I don't really have anything common with thugs on the street, but what I found, because like I worked out, I was pretty big in a uniform. I looked pretty intimidating, short sleeve shirt, and a lot of these guys out of prison would say, "Oh, how many wheels do you do? That's a how many plates can you do?" And so it kind of was sometimes an icebreaker, right? While my partner was more worried about, "Hey, shut up, keep your hands where I could see him." I get all that from a safety standpoint. I'd start talking about lifting weights, and it
Right.
kind of de-escalated. It honestly did, and sometimes while you're not gonna maybe have breakfast with these guys, it was definitely conversation. I remember one time one of them challenged me to a push-up contest in the street, and I did that in full uniform. Um, but those are encounters that I think make a difference between the public's perception of police being just hardcore, brutal, you know, not really caring about people's feelings or thoughts, to hey, there's a guy who actually took the time to talk to us. And I always felt with those encounters, if I worked a certain area and I got to know the locals, and whether it's gang members or just the local community, I felt there was a certain level of mutual respect
Mm,
that, okay, if I had a problem, they weren't going to be my problem. They weren't
mm.
going to go out of their way. Where they might have a problem with some other officer, I was the kind of guy, okay, Cardenas was pretty, he was respectful. Does
Yeah.
that make
And
sense?
yeah, totally. Would you build it? Like, how long would you be in an area? Like, would you get to know people quite deeply? Not deeply, but I
Um,
mean, like, you would build a reputation, I guess.
yeah, so there are some guys though, like LA City, LAPD, for instance, has it's 585 square miles. I think there's a total of 19 different police state division, stations.
There's a lot of
Now there are
people
some
in
guys
one
that
area.
work. Some guys work one station their entire career. I bounced
Mm,
around. Usually you do a station for 2 or 3 years, depending on what you want to do. There's all kinds of special assignments. So you get to know enough about the community leaders, the council people, what their expectations are. It's kind of hard to get to know a lot of citizens regularly, but if you're there for a few years, you get to know people for sure.
How did you get into this situation where you were in a running gun battle with a murder suspect? Because
Wow,
you
that's a
guys
long
just went.
story, right? But so that was I was working Hollywood division, and that's a little bit of a story, but I remember it like yesterday. We were in roll call, and they gave out these little, like, we're literally wanted poster, like a 8 by 10 flyer with a picture of this guy. He was wanted for attempt murder on a highway patrolman. A couple days prior, he had was stopped by the highway patrol down in Orange County, south of us, and got out of the car and started shooting out the highway patrol car, shot up the police car, and then took off. They had his license plate, and they knew he lived in Hollywood. And what happened was they sent out this poster saying, we're looking for him. We left roll call. I remember that morning we left roll call, and around maybe 1 p.m. in the afternoon, another guy I still know him to this day, got on the radio and said, "I think this attempt murder suspect's at a payphone in Hollywood at the corner of Hollywood and Western." And when he drove by, the guy saw him and jumped in his truck, and he literally, as he was driving, he smashed out the back window and started shooting with it was an M1 carbine, which is like an old they used it in the Korean War, but it's like an AR-15. And we were the second vehicle in the pursuit all over Hollywood. The interesting thing, it was before there was we had a helicopter, but the news didn't have helicopters yet in the air, so it wasn't covered like a big police chase like they are now. But our helicopter was in the air and following it, and he ended up crashing head on into this Range Rover. Who, you'd have to Google it, but there was used to be a fitness person named Kathy Smith back in the day during the Jane Fonda era. Crashed head on into her, and got out of his truck and started shooting at us. I remember this clear as day. It was on Sunset Boulevard in front of KTLA TV. There was an Arby's restaurant, roast beef sandwich place, and it ensued. It was a running gun battle. He was hiding behind things. I think there was 5 of us that were involved in it. I mean, obviously it ended poorly for him, but that was a big deal then because it was really before a lot of media coverage. Um, but it was a big deal. We ended up getting recognized by the chief for stopping a murder suspect for heroism and all that. But that was a life, and there's something happens when you're involved with something in an encounter, whether it's a fist fight or there's fight or flight they call it. And what happened was interesting because a lot of cops responded, and my partner, particularly who was driving, I was a passenger. I got out and got involved with the shootout, and it ended. I remember the supervisor came and said, "Okay, anyone that was involved in the shootout, let's gather over here. I got to get together, and we got to debrief." And my partner at the time was like, where are you going, Bruce?" I said, "Oh, I was in the shooting." It turned out he got out of the car, just got down on the ground. He ducked for cover, and that's not a good thing or bad thing. But my point is, you don't know how anyone's going to react until you're in that situation. In any fist fight in high school, no one knows what's going to happen until you experience it, because things happen. Tunnel vision. There's definitely an adrenaline rush. Like I recall tunnel vision happening. That I initially heard a loud bang because of the fire, because the gun he fired, but then after that, I didn't hear anything after that. I just remember like focusing on him. So it's interesting how your body reacts and what happens.
That's wild, man. Wild.
Yeah.
And what happened afterwards? Like, what was your process afterwards? Did it shake you up? Did you feel like you were more aware? Like, what happened in the coming weeks?
Me physically, mentally, I was fine. I mean, I know some people have different.
Yeah.
It was interesting because they take you out of the field during the investigation or just temporarily. And I remember I was assigned to the front desk taking reports just until it clears, and you have to go see the psychologist, the shrink for the department. And I remember telling him, he asked how I was doing. I said, "I'm great." I go, "Honestly, it's more stressful to work the front desk than it is to work the field, because the front desk at the police station, you get all kinds of crazy stuff happening. So, but yeah, I'm fine. I put things in categories or buckets. It was a very bad thing to have. He was a bad guy. It was a violent encounter, but I was just doing my job. I mean, I could see where people may get messed up if it was a questionable shooting or a kid got shot or something bad. Then
Mm.
it's a different mental state. But it was a very sound, legal, justified thing.
Was that your first shootout, like military and police, or that's how you had an experience
Now, the
before?
military, I had a couple. I was in the Marine Corps, but this is my first on the police department. There's one after
Mm.
that too, not as crazy, but I was involved in 2 other encounters. One with a gang member and one with a potential rapist. Yeah,
Can we carry on? Can you tell the
yeah,
story?
yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna be, um, the one with the potential. Well, it was a rape in progress. Is a call came out, and we were the second. We were once again the second car there, but it was a woman came home, and her roommate uh, had a guy holding her at knife point. So she ran out of the house, called the police, and when we got there, he was then in her bedroom holding this woman from. He was behind her, holding her in like a chokehold with a knife, and pretty much said, "Hey, I'm gonna kill her if you guys don't leave here." And we were all in one, like, a master bedroom, and he ended up long story short, I mean, without getting too graphic details, he ended up stabbed her partially, but not enough. He didn't. He wounded her, and then he kind of let her go enough that we ended up, shooting with him because he was going to kill her. So with a knife. So that was
Crazy. Yeah.
quick and loud, and in a very confined area.
And with
Once
a
again,
woman involved,
justified,
like
huh?
totally. And with a woman involved, there's like so much more risk, when it's
Yeah,
just
because
you
you're
and the
looking at the
guys. And
potential, like
yeah,
someone else getting hurt. You really have to evaluate the situation. But one thing is, there's different practices around the world, and a lot of people don't know this, but the potential for him to have kidnapped her or there's no one ever leaves a situation like that. We won't allow that.
mm,
Like you'll see on some movies, okay, I'm leaving here with her hostage. Give me a car, and no one leaves. There's no thing where he's gonna. You can't control a situation once they're not there, right?
hmm
So no matter what the situation, even if he says, I'm going to kill her. You're not leaving here. You're just not leaving. It's going to
Right.
be sorted out while we're in this building, one way or another.
What are the things? Because I'm like in my head, you just changed how I, you're like that's not how it works in the movies, and I was like, wow, that's how I thought it always worked. Like,
Yeah.
what are some other things that really I think most people think are true in because of movies that aren't?
Well, that's definitely one. I mean, yeah, no one, you hear, hey, I want a car and $50,000 and we're leaving here. Now, other agencies, but LAPD's policy, and it actually dated back to an incident that happened in the '60s called the Onion Field. There's a movie about it, but two cops stopped a suspect, and somehow one of the suspects got a hold of the cop's gun and held the cop hostage, and said, "Listen, we're leaving," and he took the cop, put him in their car, and left the scene. I think I'm trying to think if he took both of them hostage, but anyway, went up to Bakersfield, which is hours north of us, and actually killed one of the cops. And that instituted the policy where no one ever leaves a situation. No one, you never leave. Where even so, now that cop was held hostage, right? The partner just should have just said, "I'm not giving up my gun, and you're not leaving," whether it's a standoff or whether you end up shooting the suspect. And that's where shooting skills really come into play, because there's been many an incident where literally someone is holding a hostage right next to them, and they'll shoot the suspect right in the head. And now that sounds kind of scary, right? Oh my God, what if? But that's, I think, why there's marksmen and snipers and stuff. Those things happen in real
Yeah.
life. But yeah, that's kind of a myth. Yeah, no one ever leaves. No one's taken hostage, because
Mm.
you're really, because once someone leaves, then you have no control. You have no idea where they are. You don't.
Yeah, exactly. If you say we're not leaving and I'm not giving you my gun, or I'm not putting my gun down, the frame changes from them being in control to it, maybe being a standoff or you being back in control. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, too. Yeah. Oh my God. Now they're thinking, okay, well, I'm not leaving this building. What am I? Okay, I'm gonna either, most give up.
And the other story, the gang member, was that the one where you went in the bathroom and the gang member followed you and your partner apprehended them, or what was that?
Oh, did I send that to you in writing, or?
No, I did research.
Oh, I don't remember. Yeah, yeah. That was crazy. That was just like a public, like in a park, like a restroom where and
Mm.
I went in. Thank God it was prior to people being obsessed with their cell phones. 'Cause I talked about that like he was just kind of watching, and the guy followed me in the bathroom, and he thank God went in right behind him, because yeah, he had a knife, and I guess he had saw him. He had watched me go in.
Did he know you previously? Like, were you
No,
targeted,
no,
or
no,
he
just a
was just like,
random. Just saw it was just getting dark. Hey, there was a public restroom in the park, and there was people around, but I guess it was a gang member. I didn't I mean, I didn't see him. And then he followed me in a few minutes later. So yeah, those, you always have to pay attention to your surroundings. Unfortunately, even as a civilian.
what do you think most people, civilians, like don't realize about awareness, or like I guess the world that we're living in?
They don't what?
What do you think most civilians, like me, or most people don't realize about the world that we're living in? Like having headphones in, blasting, noise canceling on your phone is pretty risky when you're just walking around and there's no awareness. Like, what do you?
And I'm not an alarmist. I have a lot of friends, and I sometimes I want to be careful how I educate people,
Sure.
because I don't want people to become freaked out.
Okay.
But a lot of my female friends, I was talking to one just a short time ago, and she says she runs with both her headphones in, and with her music blasting, and I told her about a couple of incidents where women have been snatched or attacked, and they didn't even hear the guy coming. So now she runs with one earbud in. But I mean, it's the world we live in. I think it's the
Mm.
world we've always lived in. Another one of my friends, she hikes up in the mountains and doesn't go with any kind of self defense. I said, carry a stick. I said, hey, for my mountain lions, let alone if just you
Yeah.
encounter, because there are mountain lions up in the hill, up in
Yeah,
the
one hundred
mountains,
percent. Those things take
and
you out.
even if you carry a baton. And she thought, well, that's kind of. I said, listen, just think about this. You're a lone female up in the mountains. What if you encounter just a bad guy? And I don't want to scare people, but sometimes people live a little like blind
Mm.
in their surroundings and what goes on in life.
And what do you think some basic skills are that are really that would be, because once I didn't. I was talking to my brother about this the other day, and we were talking about how when we were younger, we wanted to get into fights because there was so
Right?
much
Yeah.
aggression. And then once we learnt how to fight, I was like, Jesus Christ, I would never get into a fight. Like if I saw a fight, I'm like, I'm out of here,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
now I understand what the actual consequences and the risk of even though I know how to fight, if someone doesn't know how to fight, they might get a lucky hit and I'm done.
Right,
You just
exactly.
don't know. So it's like, what would you be able to, maybe, I guess, share with us some basic skills or some good starting points for people that don't have.
It's really popular now is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is really popular everywhere around the world. That's a pretty good thing because I think a lot of fights end up on the ground or getting tied up with somebody.
Mm.
But I was the same way. I remember in high school, there was a local, like, I ended up getting my black belt in Taekwondo, which at the time I thought I was, a real badass, right? You go through the katas and the forums and you break a couple boards. And I remember even when you sparred with a couple people, you thought you were like Bruce Lee, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was great. I was efficient, but that's not really real world practical, right? So I avoid those kind of conflicts at all costs because there's always someone that's dangerous or
Totally. Totally.
armed or something you don't know, and I'd rather just stay in my lane. I think
Yeah.
the only time I've ever gotten involved with anything that involves an innocent suspect, whether I'm a cop or whether I'm a cop or I'm just a civilian, I would only get involved if someone was, potentially going to be hurt, a woman, a child, man, whatever. But yeah, I'm not one to get involved with break up a bar fight.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other
Yeah.
hand, there was an incident just recently, gosh, a few weeks ago, right in front of my house. Uh, Husband and wife, they stopped. They were having some kind of domestic dispute, and they stopped the car and got out of the car. And he was pretty, and I didn't want to get involved, but we had to. My son and I went out there because he was like threatening her, punch her in the face and all that stuff. So hey, that's not happening, man. But you know, that's the only time I would really get involved if someone's going to potentially be hurt or injured.
I think to riff off that point that you made earlier about you don't know if someone has a weapon. Like, I can't remember where I heard this story, but this guy was at a Muay Thai gym and someone stole the instructor's car. And
Really?
so the thief took off and the instructor chased him down the road. So this guy's like a champion Muay Thai fighter and went because he's like confident. He's like, dude, I can smoke this guy.
Yeah.
And he went to get in the car, guy shot him. And it's like, you just don't know. You
You
talk
never
to be a
know.
champion Muay Thai fighter, and it's like, what are your hands going to do against a gun?
Exactly.
That's
I
crazy.
always tell people, be a good witness. You know.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
that's a
really,
good
be a
one.
good witness. Call the police.
Yeah, totally. I'd love to know because I've only seen it in training day. Like, what is, and there was like a kind of an epidemic of it. What is PCP and what happens when people take it? And have you seen incidents of it when you're in the police force?
Gosh, PCP is an interesting. It was really prevalent when I worked. It was in the '90s for sure. I mean, it's still around, but there was a period of time we would go on calls. PCP was a really the drug. I don't know how it became so popular. It was very damaging, obviously. But I went on a couple calls. This guy, I heard about these stories about superhuman strength, and I remember the first time we went on a call, guy was almost naked in the middle of the street, and just standing there challenging us to fight. So we tried to subdue him physically, and he was like strength of like 10 people. It was crazy. He literally, and then the scary part was we couldn't take him down. There was two or three of us, so we got back away from him, and they took out a taser, with the electrodes, and they tased him, and he didn't. It didn't stop him. So then we're like, dealing with like some cyborg or some Back to the Future kind of thing. It was actually very scary. Um, the physical effects of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's wild. Do you know what it is? I've got no idea what it is. Like, what is PCP?
I don't know the science. I can't remember. You caught me off guard. I'd have to look it up again. But the science
Yeah.
behind it. But it crazes. It's superhuman strength. They obviously get a very strange high, but there's also a lot of physical damage to it. Some people get fried. They fries their brain. Um, I don't think it's as prevalent now as it was, but it was a big drug for a while.
Yeah,
But
wild.
I know
I
it's
mean,
chemically made. Huh?
so it's its own. It looks like it's its own substance. So it's not
Yep.
like a mix of other stuff. Crazy. I can't believe it's wild that people like make those things. You know what I mean? Then you just
It's
like,
wild what they make in a lab, and I don't know why, but they make it. Yeah.
and I'd love to know, like, you talked. I've heard you talk about this thing called purpose before pleasure,
Pleasure.
and having purpose in your life and your business and your relationships. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I've been fortunate to have a lot of purpose in my life. I think a lot of people maybe go aimlessly through life, not knowing what they want to do or what their purpose is. I've just been fortunate. I call it. I figured out I'm a servant leader. I've always been serving other people. Marine Corps, LAPD, Boy Scouts. Even as an entrepreneur, I've always served other people. Always provided a service. And while pleasure is temporary and short, right? And what I think people mistaken is they'll do something for pleasure and not realizing that's short lived, right? And I could spend a bunch of money and go to Cabo and have a good time and drink and party, but then they have to come back to reality. I think it's more important to have a purpose and be driven and build something, and you could still have pleasure, right? But a lot of people will solely live their life on pleasure and really have no purpose.
Mm.
Live check to check, month to month. Um, for me, a purpose-driven life is really important. I've found purpose. I like serving other people. Holidays, I spend my time donating to a handful of charities, or year round, actually. There's a couple of Dave, Dan Kennedy's. I'm involved with several of his charities, Trina's
Oh,
Kids,
amazing.
which goes year round. Christmas morning, I was down at the Midnight Mission, giving toys out to about 400 families. I think when you have purpose like that me anyway, I can't preach to other people what your purpose is or what their purpose is, but I think it at the end of the day, when we leave this earth, what was our purpose? What did we do? What did we accomplish? Did we just
Mm.
get through life? Do we leave any kind of mark or meaning? So I think purpose is important. It's like asking what your why is. I was fortunate when I was part of Quest that became my why.
Where did you learn about this? I think you called it servant leader. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what it's called, being a servant leader. I actually someone else it might have even been Tim Story, who's a speaker and stuff. We became friends, and it really defined someone who, for me anyway, defined who I am.
Mm.
I mean, most of us, unless you're just fortunate enough to be, I think everyone for the most part serves somebody, right? Even if you're an entrepreneur, you're still serving your customers and clients to maintain that life. Um, I've just, and it might have been something my father, because he was obviously our scout leader, and he learned about serving other people, and he had an interesting upbringing. His mother used to bring in kids that had no place to stay, but now it would be organized, be an orphanage or whatever. But she would just, if there was kids in the neighborhood that had nowhere to stay, she brought them in. So he grew up that way. He grew up, his mom always took care of kids and served them. So I kind of feel, and maybe I've learned it from him, is all serving other people has just been part of my life.
Mm. Love
And
it.
there's different levels, obviously, right?
Yeah, totally. No, just I like the sound of when you say servant leader. It's very
Yeah.
clear. It feels like something you can embody, and it's like an identity.
I feel like I identify to that. I mean,
Mm.
some people maybe think that's beneath them. I don't know. I mean, I don't. You don't have to be a priest to be a servant leader. It could be. There's different levels of servant leader, right?
What would you say? Maybe I feel sometimes actually like my purpose is split. I'm like I want to do one thing and I want to do something else, and I've committed the times when I've committed to one thing, I've had the most growth in my life. And sometimes I feel split between wanting to just get really good at something and being committed to being a great salesperson or whatever. And then other times it's wanting to, build a business and continue this side of growth and things like that. And I feel like a lot of guys get stuck because there's so many. It's like there's too many choices now. My dad always used to say he's like the problem with your generation is there's too many options. He's like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can't be just satisfied with the thing that's in front of you. And do you have any tips for finding your purpose? Not when you're completely lost, but when you're like, oh, there's lots of different flavors that I want to try.
It is true. I mean, I don't even know if it's generational. I think there's always been a lot of options for years and years, right? But
Mm.
now there are obviously plentiful the options, and I think it's okay to try a lot of things. I think it's okay to even be good at a couple things. I mean,
Mm.
everyone talks about this side hustle now, right? They have their 9 to 5 job, and Alex Ramosi says, "Hey, there's still 100, and like 100, so many days or hours that you can still do your side hustle." I think now more than ever, finding your why is probably easier because you have so many options. But then again, you can't just have ADD and be like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. That sounds like a good idea. I mean, I was fortunate, and I hope everyone always is fortunate enough to fall in love with their why or their purpose.
Mm.
There's definitely a lot of options, and I really can't tell you how to focus, because nothing worse than going through life doing that 9 to 5 thing, and that's okay because a lot of people do it, right? But if it's not for you, it's okay to switch it up. You could switch up. I think people become gosh, I've been here for 9 years. I'm already getting some tenure. I don't know what else to do. Then maybe start a side hustle and work on that until that becomes something great,
Mm-hmm.
and then leave that. But God, I wish I had a clearer answer on how to find it. But I think if you can afford it, like maybe you have a day job that covers what you need, and you focus on what you think is your why.
Mm.
I know a lot of people now start a little side business. I was told, and I've confirmed it. There's like in America alone, there's like 3 million small businesses for sale or going to close. Or so what's happening is, especially with baby boomers,
Crazy.
they're at the end of their, they're done. They don't want to work anymore. Their kids don't want anything to do with their business, so they're going to close or sell or close or just do nothing. And think about those options. A friend of mine buys laundry mats. That's not sexy, right? But she has a handful of laundry mats, and that's just her side hustle. And
Crazy.
from people like, yeah, so I think there's so many options. Selling stuff online, repurposing Amazon
Mm.
accounts. There's so many things you could do. I mean, it is true. It's endless, the opportunities now.
Can I ask, when was the point, or was there a point when you felt financially secure? Like you had got a good base and you felt like there were different.
I'm not making this up because I've heard people say it. There's a comfort. There's a zone. I'm just using America because based on the salaries, that $70,000 is a comfort. Like to get to set when you're over 70, that's when you could your mortgage is covered. Everything, all your needs in life are covered, right? And you still have money to vacation. I don't know if I've always been secure though. Like even when I went through a pretty bad divorce and I was paying a lot of money, I had the mindset that, listen, I have a roof over my head and I could feed myself, so that was my financial security. Now, could I pretend I couldn't really maybe do a lot of other things, and now that I can do more things, I remind people of this: money is merely a facilitator in life. It's only a
Mhm.
facilitator. I could tell you some sad stories of clients I've had. I've been doing this protection business for a lot of years, and I had a client even during COVID. I'd say his net worth was like $250 million, and he jumped out of a 20-story building. Um,
God.
and I thought he had it going on. I mean, he was doing a lot of good charitable stuff. So a founder of one of the biggest companies in the world, overdosed on drugs, 20 years ago when I was working with him. So money just facilitates things in life. It doesn't bring happiness. It doesn't even bring security, because some people that have millions are still feel insecure about what they have because they also scale their spend, right? You know, I'm making
That's
10
how they
million,
do.
but
Yeah.
I'm making 9 million a year, but I'm spending 10. So then they have their own challenges, right? They get in debt. So I don't know what the final. For each person, it's a threshold. I've
Mm.
always felt financially secure, and sometimes even wow, very comfortable. Like, okay, I'm not worried about anything.
Mm.
But I've always
No,
been like a basics guy too. Like, okay, the everything's covered in my life. Everything else is just additional. Whether I can help my friends and family, my loved ones, what I could do to be charitable. I've
yeah.
always tried to help people in my circle, and sometimes done some things that are probably not even business wise. I mean, I remember, shit, I bought a client one time. I bought a client a Harley Davidson, and my accountant at the time goes, "That doesn't really make sense, Bruce." I know, but he's a really nice guy. Like I like doing things for people. Just for me, that's a feel good. I'm not a good. I don't like receiving things. I would much rather give things.
Mm.
It's a much better feeling for me to give someone and see the joy that brings somebody.
Yeah, man, I feel you. It's the reason I asked that question is I've become very curious. I feel they're very similar to a lot of what you're saying. Like I feel very confident in myself. I've been in very, quite a few life or death situations and felt calm and noticed other people, get worried, and I've been pretty fine afterwards. And the area that it's like almost as if the more money I make, the more I'm like, wow, I'm broke, and I'm not broke,
Right.
but I
Yeah.
feel I feel more broke the more money I make, and it's been such an interesting, I don't know, mental thing to go through. The
It
more
does
I
happen.
save,
It
the more I'm
happens.
like, I'm like, this isn't enough. And then I get more. I'm like, oh my God, I have even less, but that doesn't make sense because it's going up. Like, really
And that
interesting.
happens. Yeah, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, wild. So I'd love to know, like, what do you feel like guys that are, you know, going through into their 30s, their careers sort of taking off, they're getting some momentum. What do you feel like men of today maybe need to hear? And, just from what you've witnessed and where the world's at.
I think, listen, it's always a good time to be here. It's no matter where you are generationally or where you are in your life cycle. I don't think there's, people, oh, it was easier then, or it's this or that, or, people talk about real estate. That I have friends of mine in a real estate game. There's never a bad time to be in real estate, right? I have friends of mine. Oh, it's horrible now because prices are so high, but yet people are still buying real estate. People are still doing transactions. So I think even if you're in your 30s or 20s, it's a great time to start. I remind people I didn't meet the founders of Quest till I was 45.
Mm.
So it's never too late to start anything, and I think it's never, I think people get, despair and discouraged, or they compare themselves to other people at their age group or age category or what they're doing. It's never too late to accomplish great things, and especially I always, look. There's a list I keep of the Colonel Sanders started way late. The founder of McDonald's, he didn't start till he was in his 50s. I mean, there's so many great stories. Vera Wang, all these great entrepreneurs that didn't even they they lost it for 30 or 40 years until they figured it out. So
Mm.
it's never too late. And that's what I hear from a lot of people. Well, I'm already, I'm in my 40s. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And it's like, why? You could start a side business anytime. It's
Mm.
never too late to do something great. I would never be discouraged. I do recommend for men though. I belong to a lot of groups, networking groups. Um, Most of them, there's a lot of free groups. I don't, I know there's a lot of pay to play things now to be part of a circle or a networking group, but I do recommend that too for anyone. Don't do it alone. You know, there's that saying about you're the sum of the five people you spend the most time with, right? Spend time with good people. Spend time with people that are better or smarter or doing well.
Mm.
Not better per se, but I feel like sometimes when you don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, right? That's what they say. I like being around people that are really doing great things,
Yeah,
and
100%.
I've
I
had
couldn't
better
agree.
success, I think, being
Mm.
around them, and that's been more recently in my life. While it might be
Really?
a little intimidating, it's great to be around successful people. I go to these speaking engagements, these Aspire events, these different elevator nights, and these different events, and there's always people that are doing great things.
Do you have some examples you could share with us that maybe some guys could look into, or
Of what?
that you found some examples that you've been to that you felt were really beneficial or that guys could look into?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you live,
Some
like I
events or
belong to a group called Metal International. It's just a group. Now, we met before COVID. We used to meet every Saturday at a theater. There was always speakers from, I mean, big names, Richard Branson, different things, and it
mm,
was very cost effective. I think the membership was like $1,000 a year. But there's a network of like now there's 400 or 500 members, and
amazing.
now we do Zoom calls. And the kind of cool thing is now we get together for dinners, just to network, just to hang out. But there's so many great events. I mean, uh, Dan Fleischman puts on events called Elevator Nights. They're
Mm.
free. We do them in studios, or every few months. There's 300 or 400 people show up to those. There's just so many. You could Google anywhere in your area, and it doesn't have to be even that organized. Sometimes there's groups get together. Especially California is great because there's so many, like even Facebook groups where people get to. There's workout groups that get together. There's entrepreneur groups that get together. There's like minded.
Without like I've been in men's groups for since I was like 21, and like it just completely like the person who I was before that and who I am now is just completely different.
Yeah,
Having that backbone, being like, I think the actual understanding, which is probably something that you got by being in the military and police force, that somebody's got your back,
yeah,
and not having that as a kid, growing up and feeling like I'm fully alone, and then having that, you're like, wow, how did I ever survive, in the
yeah.
world without that support? And like, I couldn't agree more. I think it's one of
Yeah,
the
the
most
great news is no matter where you are in the world now, I mean, a lot of these things are all on Zoom and stuff, so it's not like you feel connected. You're on a big screen and you're talking to guys around the world, and some pretty cool people are involved with these things, some big names.
yeah,
So
yeah, 100%. Lots to learn. Could you tell us a little bit more about the bodyguard and the Hollywood thing, and maybe some things that people wouldn't expect or wouldn't know about that role and that job?
yeah, I kind of you know, it goes back to the servant leader thing. I kind of figured it out early on. I was working for, a retired sergeant, and I was just doing details, and I quickly figured out how to read people and understand what their needs and wants were, and also staying out of the way. Security and bodyguard business is a very tough business in that people get involved with it, and you have to know your social cues. and I learned pretty quickly what people's needs were. I'd be around them, and that's where once again listening skills came into play. But I quickly figured out from the guy that ran the business, okay, I could do this. I took the test, I got licensed and insured, and when I started doing it, I provided the service they needed, but I always thought about what else I could do to make their life easier or think ahead, pre-planning, exits and entrances and where we're going. But what happens is, and I lost a couple accounts because of this. I didn't realize this. I provided a very unique service. I would travel with somebody, and people ask me this. I've been with clients. But Courtney Love was a prime example. I was with her for 10 years, and we spoke very little. Like I would go through her assistant. They'd say, "Okay, here's what we're doing. You're gonna meet her tonight. We're going to the premiere. After parties here. Okay, great." And I knew what I was doing, and it wasn't like when I would meet her and get in the car, there was no conversation. Uh, and where people in the security and protection business feel they cross that boundary, that personal privacy thing, right? So I would carry on, and I think I had my successes because I didn't really communicate much with the client. I would always go through the assistants. And I remember one time I sent one of my guys to Mexico with a really big name, and I said, "Listen, just you got to stay out of the way. You're just there to protect her." Throughout the course of the week they were there, this client was working out in the gym, and my guy, I guess, decided to give her some training tips. Well, because he was watching her in the gym. So I didn't know about this till it all ended, right? So then that happened, and then they went to dinner a couple times, and the client would say, "Oh, please join us, please join us." And I was told him, I said, "I never join a client for dinner. I sit at the bar, sit at another table, but I'm never there because you have to be. I'm always watching the room." And I guess what happened was the last night they're like, "Hey, listen, just join us. It's the last night. No big deal." So we decided to join him at the dinner table, and that wasn't the worst of it. And then as the wine was passed around, he had a couple of glasses of wine. So I didn't know any of this till I got back. I got a call from the manager, very well known manager. Said, "Hey, can you stop by my office?" And said, "The good news is we love you, Bruce. We're going to continue to use you where we can. But the bad news is we're firing you from this client because your guy did the following: gave her training tips, got too comfortable, and ended up drinking wine." And I asked him afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, but they invited him." I said, "But you didn't have the social intelligence to know they were just being polite? I mean, even everyone's always going to offer. Everyone's always going to say, 'Oh, come on, join us.' That's just a courtesy. You need to, in the security business, you need to be able to decipher, okay, they're just being a nice person, right? Everyone's, hey, would you like something to eat or drink? That's what you say to people, right? No, thank you. I brought my own food." And that's how I had such great success. I had such great success because all people knew was Bruce did his job. I never heard from him. He didn't interfere with my life or my privacy. And I picked up some pretty good clients that way. Even in the urban community, believe it or not, I picked up a couple urban artists, and their first response to me was, after I was around them for a while, they would either say it directly to me or I would hear from the manager say, "The artist really likes you because you're not in their business.
Mm,
Every time we hire someone, they feel like they're part of their circle, their posse. They want to chop it up." And to me, I'm just providing a service. And it's
yep,
a very,
totally.
it's, yeah, and it's a tough thing because I've literally been with clients for years, and all they know is my name. They don't ask about my family. They don't ask, and nor do I want them to, because if they do, it's just a courtesy. And occasionally a client will say, how have you been, Bruce?" "I've been great, thank you." I don't then ask how they've been. It's just a one sentence. And I have people that struggle when I have my close friends. They're like, "I don't understand. What do you don't talk to them?" But because here's where they have a problem with me when I tell them that story, because here's Bruce, the bodyguard, who doesn't say a word to anybody, but then switch gears the next day. I'm in the nutrition space, or I'm at an expo and I'm talking to everyone. I have ambassadors working for me, I'm hiring athletes, I'm talking on a podcast. So I've learned over these years my social cues. I know where I fall into place. And being a servant leader is easy. So I'm serving someone at this level, I know where I stand. One really big example is, and where you have to learn, I call it a pecking order in life. People don't like that. But if I'm with the founder of our company, I go to a meeting, I know he's going to be predominantly the voice piece. He's going to be the speaker. I may be in a meeting and I may give some, information, but I respect that he's the boss. He's going to be speaking. A lot of people, They don't get that. And same thing when I go to a room, I bring some of my friends to social settings, some big events, and there's some of my friends I can't bring to some events because they don't know how to switch gears. Like I could clearly say, listen, we're going to be going to this event. It's hosted by Celebrity A. I'm just a guest of their assistant. You're a guest of mine. Understood? Yeah, yeah. And next thing you know, see that celebrity, they're walking up, hey, what's up, man? Trying to high five them. And it goes back to the pecking order. We're a guest of a guest, and sometimes it's okay just to be, a wallflower. So,
Yeah, yeah, totally, man. It's so interesting, isn't it? And that's okay. I think that shows confidence in yourself. It's like a
yeah,
lack of confidence when you break through and you're like, I have to be noticed. And
it's
it's
a
like,
it's a lack of confidence. That's what I told one of my buddies, and he took it personally. I said, it's a lack of confidence. And I'll give you an example. One of a former president, we were at a good friend of mine is connected to the son of a really famous president, right? And we were at a gun show, believe it or not, a firearms show, and the president showed up, and he uh, he set it up. He said, "Hey, we're gonna do a meet and greet. We're gonna do a meet and greet with him." I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. That's great." And it was only I think there was 5 of us or 6 of us, and the publicist said, "Listen, he's running really, really late. Like this is just a favor. They're telling us why he's still speaking.
mhm.
He really doesn't even have time to meet you guys, but we're doing it because of the relationship with John. So there's 5 of you. Listen, it's literally just walk up, take a picture, and go on." And I was the third. I was the third person. There was 5 of us, right? The first guy got up there, and I could see he started. He was, "Oh yeah, my wife's a big fan." And the publicist is, I could see the deer in the headlights. I said, "Holy shit!" I told him just take a picture and go. The second guy was kind of the same way. "Oh, it's an honor, sir." Listen, I'm sure that what I tell people too is these celebrities, it doesn't register. They just keep going. Like they don't think of, they're not like, they don't want to hear about your wife and or your story. You're a big fan. They're polite. They smile. But at the end of the day, they hear that 1,000 times a day, right? This was just a courtesy. It was a photo op. And what happened was I was then the third person. I went up. I didn't even say a word. I just shook hands. And as I was walking away, the president, said, "There's the guy that gets it." And by the way, the second 2 guys after me did the same exact thing I did. They just stopped, took the photo. They realized, oh shit. And the publicist was like, "What are you guys doing?" So my point is, to all that long story was, you have to have the social cues to know. Okay, we were given an opportunity to see someone really important. We want to say hi to them. The time was so limited. Just take a picture and move on. They're not going to remember you. There's nothing about that that's going to happen in their life that's going to change other than you had an opportunity to meet someone famous. Take advantage of it and just keep moving on. But a lot of people feel like they have that moment in time, and it doesn't always work. So
Mm,
yeah,
yeah, man. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
yeah,
That's been my biggest takeaway from our conversation so far. Is it's
yeah.
so true, And like, I love that he's like, there's a guy that gets it,
But I didn't even look back. I just kept walking, yeah, okay, yeah.
That's
Because
awesome.
I think he was annoyed by the first 2. Like shit, like what's going on here?
Oh, man, amazing. Do you have a habit that you've kept for a really long time that you think is pivotal that you'll keep for the rest of your life? Like it's a cornerstone habit, maybe something you do in the morning, evening.
Yeah. One habit is, and I'm gonna go right from here when we get off the call. I work out every morning at the same time with a training partner, 7 a.m. California time, religiously. I never miss a day. If I'm
Awesome.
traveling, I might adjust my schedule if I'm traveling, but Monday through Friday I work out with a training partner, and then on weekends I usually do my own thing. But that's one thing. It's just and whether I like lifting heavy, I'm pretty serious about it. But it's one thing I just don't want to miss, no matter what.
Mm,
And whether
yeah.
it's my therapy, I don't know what it is, but it's something I just need to get done and get out of the way. Um,
Yeah.
I don't really have a lot of rituals. I kind of laugh sometimes. I mean, I have mixed feelings. I've done cold plunges. I've done different things, but I've seen some of these people on Instagram, and sometimes people will be like, by the time you get done with your breathing and your meditation, your cold plunges and your your keto coffee, it's already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, I don't begrudge anyone who does it. I don't have all those rituals. Sometimes I've done them just to check it out. Done different things, some different breathing, and I sometimes sleep with my mouth taped for CO2 and all. But working out is one of the pretty much the regimented things. Everything else it's a fad, or I've tried it. Okay, that's worked. It doesn't work, but that's about it. I've done it. Don't get me wrong. In the Marine Corps, it was a cold shower in and out, but you know.
Man, I love that. That's a great place to finish. Thank you, Bruce. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing these stories.
Thank you very much. Very, very fun.